Deep in the Congo Basin, witnesses now claim the Mokele-Mbembe is real, and the truth behind its return is far more terrifying than legend ever imagined.
What if the reason we haven't found it isn't because it doesn't exist, but because we stopped looking for the wrong reasons? The Mokele-Mbembe has been described in the Congo Basin for over 200 years. The witnesses are not anonymous. They have names, dates, professions, and documented testimonies that have never been satisfactorily explained away.
And tell me about the history of this creature.
Huyu pepo wa majini, yeye hutoka mara kwa mara. Sisi wavuvi huwa tunaweka video zetu hapa na hatuvui kabisa.
A trained biologist watched something in Lake Tele for 20 minutes in broad daylight. An aerospace engineer recorded sounds that physicists confirmed matched no known animal. A man who had seen one as a teenager, 45 years earlier, picked a sauropod out of a book of prehistoric animals without being asked. At some point, dismissing all of this stops being skepticism and starts being something else. This is that story. And by the end of it, you will want to know more. 5 witnesses, 5 decades, 1 description. We are not starting with legend. We are starting with people, real, documented, named individuals who encountered something in the Congo Basin and reported it, not to get famous, not to sell a book, but because they saw something they could not explain and told someone about it. The first is Reframing Mokele. He was 14 years old when it happened, paddling his canoe around a bend in the Lake Tele River in the Congo. He noticed the water behaving wrongly, flowing backwards as he described it, and then a reddish-brown, snake-like head rose 6 to 8 feet above the surface directly ahead of him. He paddled the other direction as fast as he could. The animal submerged, its brownish back breaking the surface briefly before it disappeared. When American biologist Roy McCall interviewed Mokele in 1980, 45 years after the sighting, McCall's book of prehistoric animals was lying open on the table. Mokele, without being prompted, without being asked, pointed to a picture of a sauropod dinosaur and said, "That is what I saw." The second witness is Ivan T. Sanderson, a Scottish naturalist who was conducting wildlife surveys in Cameroon in 1932. Not searching for any unknown creature, not interested in cryptozoology, just doing his job. On the Mainyu River, something with a head the size of a hippopotamus lunged at his boat. He described it as the most terrifying animal encounter of his professional life, and he had spent years in African wilderness. The third is Herman Registers, an American aerospace engineer, the kind of person trained to observe and measure things precisely, who reached Lake Tele in 1981 and watched a 30 to 35-foot long-necked animal cross the lake. His camera film was destroyed by the heat and humidity. He returned with audio recordings of a sound he could not identify, recordings that were later analyzed by physicist Kenneth W. Templin, who confirmed the vocalizations did not match any known wildlife. The fourth is Marceline Agnagna, a Congolese biologist working for his country's Ministry of Water and Forests, a government scientist, conducting an official survey near Lake Tele in 1983. At 2:30 in the afternoon, in clear daylight, with a local guide beside him, he observed an animal in shallow water for 20 full minutes. Long, flexible neck, 1.5 to 3 meters tall. Small, elongated head. Smooth, grayish-brown body. He tried to film it. His camera failed. The lens cap was still on, or the setting was wrong. His explanation changed slightly between interviews, which skeptics have used against him. But the observation itself, 20 minutes, midday, a trained zoologist, a government employee, a corroborating guide, has never been dismissed with anything stronger than his camera failed. And the fifth is Mambu, a fisherman whose story was documented by a journalist from New Lines magazine sitting on a riverbank with him. Mambu swears on his daughters, his sons, his wife, and his God, that what he saw on that October morning, a dark shape rising from the river 100 feet away, unmistakably alive, unmistakably large, was Mokele-Mbembe. The Congolese naturalist sitting next to him around the fire quietly says, "Probably a hippo." Mambu doesn't argue. He has been telling this story for years. He knows how it lands. He tells it anyway. 5 people, a teenager, a naturalist, an engineer, a government biologist, a fisherman, different countries, different decades, no shared connection, no common motive, all describing the same long neck, the same smooth skin, the same size, the same behavior. You can dismiss one of them. Dismissing all 5 requires a different kind of effort. The paper trail goes back 250 years, and nobody compared notes. Here is what makes the witness accounts above even harder to set aside. They slot into a written record that starts in 1776 and has never meaningfully contradicted itself. That year, French missionary Liévin Bonaventure Proyart published his account of the Congo River region. In it, he described enormous footprints, 3 feet in circumference, claw marks pressed deep into the earth, and wrote that the creature responsible must have been monstrous. He never saw it, he only saw the evidence it left. Fast forward 137 years to 1913. German Captain Ludwig von Stein zu Lausnitz is conducting a colonial survey in the same region, completely independently from tribes who have had no access to Proyart's text, who speak different languages, who live hundreds of miles apart. He collects descriptions that land in the same place: brownish-gray, smooth-skinned, elephant-sized body and a neck, long, flexible, unlike anything in any existing field guide, that every single witness emphasizes above everything else. Von Stein also records something so specific it is difficult to explain as contaminated folklore. The creature's preferred food plant, a liana with large white blossoms, milky sap, and apple-like fruit, and a path near the Sambo River that locals said the animal had worn through the vegetation to reach that plant. The path was fresh, the plants were there, the animal was not. Then, in 1901, sandwiched between those two accounts, something happened that should have changed how Western science approached this entire question. British explorer Sir Harry Johnston spent years following reports from Congo villagers about an animal they called Addy, something like a striped donkey. Scientists in London told him it was tribal mythology. Johnston went anyway, collected skin and skull samples, and brought them back to London, where zoologists confirmed a previously unknown species, a relative of the giraffe, over 200 kilograms, living in a forest that European researchers had been moving through for decades. The okapi, not a small animal, not something that required advanced detection equipment to find. An animal that weighed as much as a large horse, hiding in plain sight, known to every community in the region for generations, dismissed by Western science until a single determined researcher decided to take the local knowledge seriously. The question the okapi forces onto the table is simple. If that was possible in 1901, what else is possible now, in a forest that is still, after everything that has been cleared, one of the least explored ecosystems on Earth? The investigation was hijacked, and science walked away. By the mid-20th century, the Mokele-Mbembe should have been exactly the kind of question that serious field biology was equipped to investigate. The witness accounts were documented, named, and consistent across a century and a half of independent collection. The habitat was real and genuinely underexplored. The precedent of the okapi had established that large, unknown animals could survive in the Congo Basin without Western science's knowledge. Everything pointed toward a legitimate, fundable research question. Instead, what happened was this: young Earth creationists got there first. For groups whose entire theological framework depends on dismantling the scientific consensus on evolution and the age of the Earth, a surviving sauropod dinosaur in the Congo was not an interesting biological puzzle, it was a weapon. If a creature that should have gone extinct 65 million years ago was still alive, it would create a problem for evolutionary timelines that mainstream science would have difficulty explaining away. And so expeditions began to be funded not by universities or wildlife conservation organizations, but by creationist ministries. Paleontologist Donald Prothero documented this directly. The quest for Mokele-Mbembe had become, in significant part, a creationist project, and the people consistently mounting expeditions into the Congo were ministers, not wildlife biologists. The contamination this caused was total and lasting. Mainstream science, which is not immune to the social cost of association, stepped back. Any researcher who expressed genuine interest in investigating the Congo reports risked being professionally categorized alongside people who believed the Earth was 6,000 years old. The risk was not worth taking, and so the legitimate question, what are people seeing in these rivers, and is there any biological explanation for the consistency of their descriptions, was abandoned to the people least equipped to answer it honestly. This is the part of the story that almost never gets told. The Mokele-Mbembe was not investigated and found to be nothing. It was investigated by the wrong people for the wrong reasons, and then abandoned by the right people for political ones. That is not the same thing. And the difference matters enormously for what we actually know, which, given that the Congo Basin contains river systems no scientific expedition has ever reached, is considerably less than the confident dismissals in Western science writing tend to suggest. We took its forest. Now something is moving toward us. Between 2002 and 2023, the Democratic Republic of Congo lost nearly 10% of its total forest cover. In 2022 alone, an area equivalent to 8,000 football fields was cleared every single day. The forces behind this are not mysterious. 75 million people depend on this land for survival, clearing small agricultural plots using slash-and-burn methods that have been practiced for generations, but now operate at a scale the forest cannot absorb. Beneath the forest floor, veins of copper, cobalt, and gold, the materials the global technology economy runs on, are being extracted by mining operations, whose concessions spread through the basin faster than local authorities can register the loss. New roads are reaching places that required weeks of canoe travel just 20 years ago. And here is the thing that changes the entire picture. The sightings are following the tree line. For most of the previous century, Mokele-Mbembe encounters came from the deep interior, from hunters and guides in the most remote stretches of the basin, places effectively unreachable for any follow-up. Those reports were easy to set aside. The forest swallowed everything. But recent analysis of sighting data shows a pattern that cannot be coincidence. The majority of new reports are clustered not in the deep interior, but along freshly deforested riverbanks, logging corridors, and the expanding edges of human settlement, precisely where the forest has most recently been removed. Czech conservationist Laura Vlachova, speaking to National Geographic, described it this way. In bigger settlements where habitats are being pushed into, people are suddenly encountering large animals all the time. The people telling her they've seen Mokele-Mbembe are not coming from isolated forest communities with generations of folklore. They are people in expanding settlements who have never encountered animals like this before, because until recently, the forest kept the distance. In 1983, Herman Regusters watched something cross Lake Tele and came back with audio recordings that physicists could not explain. In 1988, a Japanese film crew flying over that same lake captured 15 seconds of footage showing a wake and a moving shape that the entire crew, including Congolese wildlife official Jose Borges, described as a large animal with a humped back. Skeptics said swimming elephants, paddling canoes. The footage, like Regusters' recordings, has never been definitively explained in either direction. What has changed is not the evidence, it is the address. Whatever was deep in the forest is not staying deep in the forest. And the most straightforward explanation for that requires no prehistoric animal, no mythology, no supernatural element at all. We are removing the habitat that kept it hidden, and now it has nowhere left to go that we haven't already reached. The people who actually live there never called it a mystery. Every Western expedition that entered the Congo Basin arrived with the same assumption baked into its methodology. The locals have legends, we have science, and our job is to find out which one is right. This assumption is worth examining because it has produced a century of expeditions that asked the wrong questions in the wrong way and came back confused about why the answers didn't land cleanly. The communities along the Congo's rivers do not experience the Mokele-Mbembe as an open question. It is not a cryptid to them. It is not a mystery. It is a known feature of the landscape with understood behavior, recognized territory, and established consequences for those who disregard the boundaries it enforces. Which stretches of river to avoid at dusk, which channels not to enter during certain seasons, which areas of bank are not safe to camp near. When Roy McCall interviewed Firmin Mokele in 1980, Mokele was not describing something he half believed in. He was describing something he had seen, something the community around him had been navigating for generations, and something that, when he looked at McCall's book of prehistoric animals, he could point to in a photograph without hesitation or prompting. When Marcelin Agnagna watched something in Lake Tele for 20 minutes in 1983, his local guide was standing beside him. The guide was not surprised by the animal's presence. He was surprised that Agnagna's camera wasn't working. The knowledge that something large lives in those waters is not folklore in these communities. It is operational information, the kind that gets passed down because ignoring it has consequences. And now that the forest is being removed, those consequences are arriving closer to the human perimeter than they ever have before. The boundaries are being erased from the outside. Whatever observed those boundaries from the inside is running out of space. The file is still open, and it's getting harder to close. So here is where we actually are. A teenager who saw something in a river in 1935 and picked it out of a book of dinosaurs 45 years later without being asked. A naturalist whose boat was charged on the Mainyu River in 1932 by something with a head the size of a hippopotamus. An aerospace engineer whose audio recordings of an unidentified vocalization physicists confirmed matched no known animal. A government biologist who watched something in Lake Tele for 20 minutes in broad daylight and couldn't film it. A fisherman who swears on his children, whose story a naturalist sitting next to him quietly attributes to a hippo, which raises its own question, because hippos are well known in the Congo, and fishermen who have spent their lives on these rivers generally know what a hippo looks like. No bones, no clear photograph, nothing you can hold. But 5 named witnesses, 2.5 centuries of consistent written accounts, an okapi-shaped hole in the argument that the Congo holds no more secrets, a scientific establishment that didn't debunk the creature so much as abandon it for political reasons, and a deforestation crisis that is now physically compressing whatever lives in that forest toward the places where humans are. The Congo Basin still contains river systems no expedition has ever reached. Species are formally classified there every year, not discovered, classified, because the local communities already knew them, and Western science had simply never visited. The Mokele-Mbembe may be a surviving animal. It may be something that doesn't fit any existing category. It may be the most consequential unanswered question in natural history, sitting in a forest we are currently destroying faster than we can explore it. What it is not, what it has never been, despite a century of premature dismissal, is a closed case. The file is still open, and the more forest we remove, the harder it will be to close it before something answers the question for us. If you want to go deeper on this, the expeditions, the suppressed evidence, the witnesses science refused to take seriously, stay on this channel. We are just getting started.